Hello, this is day 2, session 1 of the integration between PBIS and Time In for Schools. Today, Dr. Randall will talk about the 3 elements of Time In, which are boundaries, which includes rules and consequences, predictability, which involves consistency and repetition, and caring others means positive relationships and support. And how easily that connects to the tenets of PBIS, which is predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. So enjoy and check the connectedness between the two. And as always, the slides for this presentation will be presented at the very end.
When we think about it, what are some of the key elements? Some of the take-home messages or takeaway messages about when you think about Time In. What are some of the key elements that kids need from us in any setting, but kind of relating it to more the school setting? One is boundaries, the safety part, which is part of your motto, right? Here, and so the 3 areas are boundaries, predictability, and caring others. And I want to talk a little bit about how each of these areas, the school's rules and consequences, create the safety environment, how consistency and repetition in your classrooms create the routine that gives me predictability to trust you, and then social support or caring others. So the first one, we're going to, and I wanted to take this back to your PBIS, directives or
initiative for us.
Initiative. And in there, do you see how even in that one it kind of fits the same model, that theirs is predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. And so it fits. So we're not trying to change your model or anything. We're just giving you a little more information to live the model, I guess, would be the way to say. So boundaries and safeties. Classroom rules offer a safe environment. I actually, because I have a lot of back problems, I go to yoga for the stretching of it, and my yoga, call it mentor, won't ever do any meditation or any relaxation if there's anything new or anything unsettling in the environment, because she says you have to be able to trust your environment to go into that safe place. It's the same way in the classroom. I can't settle down and learn from that environment if there's chaos in the room, if there's somebody bringing some energy into that room, if I never know the consequence of my behavior, if it changes, if there's so putting the classroom rules there offers safety, but they must be stated. And this is one, not so much for schools, because I find schools typically state the school rules in some way, and classroom rules are usually somehow clearly stated, typically. Often in families, though, there's rules that aren't clearly stated, so the child never knows when that's happening. But just to take it to the classroom setting, it's important, one, that your students are clear about what school rules are, and secondly, that if you have some extra ones or they're operationalized differently in your classroom, that those be clear. Very important. And the other thing is consistency. Don't switch them up all the time, or don't say, today I'm just going to ignore those things. We have to be as consistent as possible. And I'm going to talk more again about procedural memory. Remember we talked about procedural memory, automatic reflexive way of responding. It's laid down by patterns. Well, to trust my environment, I have to know that pattern's occurring, okay? So consistency is really important in how we look at how do we define a safe environment at the school is based on your school rules, and we have to look at that. So the other thing is just some kids will have learned by testing their environment in the age of about 2. They have learned that adults are there to create safety, and so they don't need to test it quite so often. Or the test might be more subtle about whether or not I trust you to keep the boundaries safe for me. But many of our children, particularly if you've grown up in a high-risk, neglectful, or abusive environment, never had that sense of safety, that boundary there that I can perform. So what we're talking about isn't constriction. What we're talking about is in this classroom, there's a lot of freedom of expression and movement within safe boundaries, right? So you're not talking about rigidity, you're talking about keeping an environment consistent and safe. Some kids have never had that in their life, right? So if I want to make sure that the walls around me are safe, I touch them, right? And if I really want to make sure, because they've never been consistently safe, I push them, right? So those kids who really aren't sure about the safety in the classroom will push the boundaries. They will continue to say, hey, are you going to, and what does that look like? What does it feel like? How are the boundaries set? And for some kids whose procedural memory is, I only get attention or my needs met when I push boundaries, guess what happens? In your classroom, right? You're going to see the same thing. Okay, so now for predictability. All right, you want the daily routine. Okay, we have talked a little bit about potential ways of looking overall as a school entity to make sure there is some feeling of predictability and routine in how the kids move through or function at the school setting, but it also requires routine in your classroom. Whenever I'm working particularly with high-risk kids, I try never to change the time of day that I work with them. But these are kids who've really had a lot of trauma, right? And/or I also try not to change the sequencing of how I do it. So I have an opening, greeting, checking in time. I have for you it would be your content or your curriculum. I have my mental health curriculum, whatever I'm going to be working on, that's got fairly good patterns within it. And then at the end of that, I have a way to close it up so that transitions can occur well. So however, your content is of course going to change because you're teaching, right? You're going to be teaching, but however you open and close the classroom time period, it can be important in helping the kids with transition and with that routine. So if you have a routine, if I know I come in your class and in your class the first thing we're going to do is paper and pencil type work or reading work or a check-in kind of thing, I know how to get prepared for that if it's routine. Otherwise, you have that little bit of, oh, what's the teacher doing, where, what, that kind of thing. So as much as you can, it's really good to have that. It enhances your time on task. If you have a routine, it will enhance the amount of time your kids will spend on task. It decreases for those kids who have a lot of, I never knew what was happening in my world, so I have to be hyper vigilant. It decreases that hypervigilance because when the kids don't know what's going to happen next and they're like, oh, what is the teacher, oh, what are we doing next? I have to, because everybody's out of sync at that moment. It's not a horrible thing if you don't have issues, but if you have issues, I have to be checking out the room to make sure it's safe because everybody's a little off right now for me. So every time we're not sure what's going on in the classroom, you re-trigger, right? I'm not sure my world is safe, and I'm going to be checking. And those are the kids who are going to be always, they won't get on that task till much later than the other kids do, right? And then you're like, hey, Johnny, get back on, what are you doing? Can't you see we're all in the, well, Johnny's had to check out the whole room, so he couldn't get to that book, right? Because he's been looking around the room to make sure, hey, what's going on? Am I safe? What's going to happen here? What's the next, And part of it isn't because he doesn't trust you, right? He's just can't trust anything, really. And so over time, the sad thing though is that we can get predictable chaos. Okay, you can get predictable. So you can actually create a template of predictable chaos in your classroom. You just don't really want to do that. Right? So and so what you want to develop is positive patterns. Kids hear instruction from you, you want them to assimilate it, you want them to be able to feed it back. So you're modeling a teaching loop, right? You're orienting them to a task. I should have actually put a teaching loop in there and I didn't think of that, but you're orienting them to a task, you're providing the instruction, you're seeing that they can do it, you're giving the positive feedback or corrective feedback, right? And then you can move on to new learning. So that's a template or a pattern that you're trying to do in your classroom. And so by having very good teaching loops in what you're doing, you're going to create new patterns of development. Many children never had a teaching loop that was ever fulfilled as a consistent cycle in their life. So as part of what we do working with little kids, we look at, we have parents come in between the ages of birth and 3. This is where this test is done. And we ask parents to choose a game or something and say, teach your child how to do that. So it might be how to stick out your tongue if they're really little, like, you know, the reciprocity of sticking your tongue out. It might be turning the pages of the book. It might be building a tower. Depending on the age of the child, what's the next task they might come to. Some caregivers never clearly define what the task is. They're just always giving feedback that they're wrong. Okay? And so for some, they give so much instruction of what to do, they never allow the child to perform, right? So there's many different maladaptive teaching loops that might have happened in this child's life, and what you're trying to model is what is a healthy, good pattern of learning, right? So you're developing positive patterns of neurodevelopment by keeping a routine and a consistency about what you're doing. And what you're developing now is new templates. You're setting up new procedural memories for the child. Now, for some, you're just validated. If they've already had healthy ones, you're just validating whatever it is. A lot easier to teach. Okay? A lot easier to teach if they've already had some good, positive teaching loops in the parenting or in other environments prior to you. But, you know, you have them in middle school. You hope maybe they got some of that prior to getting here, but not always, right? So some of that's going to be happening. So then the next one is social support. Now I wanted to share this with you. I actually took, when I was pre-doctorate, I did a project, a study, looking at what kind of social support networks we need. Okay? So there's a medical construct called psychoneuroimmunology, psychologically, neurologically, immunologically. We are one. We put the head on the body and realize they work together. You'll see a lot of this if you're looking at any of the cancer research or HIV/AIDS, but anything that looks at chronic health. We know one of the most important things for your well-being, whether it's physical or mental health, is the supportive system around you. So this is what I call the caring others, okay? That's what you guys are. You're the caring others, okay, in their life. And so I put it back to the research that I did, and then I was looking at, I did a study where I looked at social support networks. What kind of support do we need, and how does that relate to your temperament or personality, okay? So I'm not doing the temperament personality part of that right now. I just want to talk about that there's different things that we need from our caring others. And they can be looked at in the 3 A's. There's aid, okay? So sometimes from you, I need aid, which means that I can't, as a student, my occupation is to learn, and I can't learn effectively. I might have a learning disorder, I might have some executive functioning problems, which means that I can't focus well, I can't plan well. I need your help. So there are some kids in your class, the support or caring other they need from you is that. They need help. They need aid. It might be that you ask that they get tested and get aid through other resources, whatever that might be. It might be just a little extra of your time. How many of you have ever seen the Fat City Workshop? Right? Frustration, anxiety, tension, kids who have learning problems in your classroom. It's a great DVD. I do have it if you guys ever want to show it. It simulates, so while you're watching it, you develop the learning disorder that kids in your class have. So it simulates that. So you get a sense of what's going on for the kids in the class who need this aid part from you. Okay? Affirmation. Okay? Sometimes what I need from my world is affirmation. That they're valued as a person. Sometimes they're seeking attention from you because they want to be affirmed that they're important. There's 2 main things that we need in our life, right, for our mental health and well-being: relationship and a sense of purpose. Okay, meaning making value, spirituality, however you want to define that, right? So they need sometimes to just say, glad you're in class today, good to see you today, I'm affirming that you're important in this world, okay? They're valued as a person, maybe their talents and skills are valuable, and they can achieve their goals. Real important to hear from a teacher that there's a possibility, even though they're struggling, that they can achieve their goals. One of the number one places where students will learn whether they go on or not in a certain career or not is whether their teacher has told them whether they make it or not. And it's more on the negative than the positive. Sometimes you'll tell them you can make it, and you'll see they don't offer it. But if you tell them they won't, has more valence, more energy behind it for them. Even if it looks like they're not giving you any credibility, they do. And then the last one is affection. Some kids just need to know they're cared about, right? It's a little harder in our litigious world. We can't go around hugging every kid. But I am one who's a little bit more open on that if a kid needs me to say, hey, I think they're a great person, or that they're cared about, that's really important. And so I think teachers, mentors, other caring adults can provide that affection. But also, in social support, the way you learn many of these things is about caring for others. So many places have, and I think as you think about time in, and you might want to look at that, we have talked about it just a little bit with administration, is that the kids here should have a service component to the curriculum, right? Because when you give, social support is amazing, okay? So if I'm out there giving my social support to you, guess what? I also, not only if I give you social support, do I boost your immune system, guess what happens to mine? It is also boosted, right? That's the reciprocity of it. So also my sense of purpose and meaning making, if I give to you, I'm going to have more sense of purpose. So it's a two-way street. So it might be, do you know how kids who, you hear about it all the time, I don't know, you might have more sophisticated strategies. I'm going to just talk about the little kids I hear about sometimes. You know, the little kid in the classroom who's a little bit of a problem, and the teacher's having a problem, so they make them the classroom helper and they erase the blackboard or whatever, you know, that whole sort of thing. Well, that's a part of that, that's that social support mechanism in work, really is what that's that model, because what you're doing is you're saying, hey, you're important in my classroom to help me, but that kid, through doing the service, is getting that sense of meaning making, right? So those things work together. So the more you can think about these strategies and how to put them into what you're doing, then you can provide more of that time in issue.
Okay, we hope you enjoyed that. Next will be day 2, session 2, where Dr. Randall will go over the contact cycle, time in and communicating with students at school, and some specific strategies begin to form here with how to talk specifically to students. I need you to stop doing, I need you to start doing, and also offering students a clean slate, maybe for the next day, the next 5 minutes, but whatever problem they had, they still have a clean slate to move forward. All right, and the slides will follow right now.